The Death of the Billable Hour, Episode 26. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Profit with Law. Welcome back. So if you listened to the last episode, we had a wonderful interview with Stacy Brown Randall. And at the end of the interview, I mentioned that she has a training program to teach you how to get referrals without asking. And what I failed to share with you is that she has the price of her program is going up in August. So on August 1st, she's raising the price of her program permanently. And this is the last opportunity to get it at the current published price. So the price of the self-study is $697, I believe. And it's going up to $997. So if you want to save $300, if you were thinking about getting it, now's your opportunity. And as I mentioned, if you get it using my link, my referral link, I will get a commission, but I will also be doing a 2-session group program to facilitate putting into action what she teaches in there. So if you're interested, go to profitwithlaw.com/referrals, profitwithlaw.com/referrals, and sign up for it, and I will see you in that group program. So that being said, let's dive right in today to, as you can tell from the title of this episode, I have a strong opinion about the billable hour, and we're going to basically talk about it for the next 20, 30 minutes. And in episode 3, I shared with you that I designed the Firm Differentiator 10X system. And the basis of that system is to look at every part of the business of law and question all of it from a business perspective and say, okay, is this the best and most efficient way to run a business? And if not, why are law practices running this way? And one of those is the billable hour. This touches on 2 of the 3 key pillars in the Firm Differentiator 10X system. The differentiator, where we question the beliefs of before and turn them around and perhaps adopt new ones. And the transformation, which is where you, the firm owner, needs to embrace the new idea and transform yourselves. And that's easier said than done. There's a lot of resistance. We have been doing things a certain way, and therefore that must be the right way. This way must be wrong. That is an automatic response that you will have internally when listening to this episode. So understand that that is natural, and part of being able to be successful in being different is to embrace these kinds of new ideas. So that being said, I want to run right into what are the pros and cons of hourly billing? Why do I have such a strong opinion about it? And what is the alternative that I propose instead of hourly billing? Now, some of you may have already adopted this into your practice, and if you did, kudos to you. You can still listen to this episode. You might pick up some nuggets of information regarding your pricing, but understand that also next week I'm going to have another episode on pricing where we're going to dismantle how to price the alternative to hourly billing. And that might help you understand what you might have done right or what you might have done wrong in creating your own pricing package, and might give you some really good ideas. So if this episode's not for you, listen definitely next week, because that one is for you. So if you are billing hourly in your firm, then you have to listen to this episode. And here we go. What are the pros and cons of hourly billing? Well, I have 2 pros that I listed, and one of them is a direct correlation to the firm's costs, a direct correlation of revenue to the firm's costs. So if the firm is paying an associate for their time, they're paying them full time to work in the firm, then they have 2,200 hours in the year if you're going by a 40-hour work week, and they should have a certain percentage of that as billable, and that's how we can be sure that they are paying for themselves in the firm. Now, what the markup of that is, what their hourly rate is part of the reason why some firms are making it and some are not. Maybe you're not charging enough. When you're doing hourly billing, that billing, the retail price, the price you're charging your client, should be anywhere from 2 to 4 times the cost of that attorney. Closer to 4 times is much healthier. So let's see if we can do some live math here. I'm actually going to pull up a calculator. I'm not trying to do it in my head. So let's say that an attorney costs you $150,000 for the year, and let's say that out of their 2,200 hours, you get 1,800 billable hours. So the cost of your billable hour is $83 an hour. If you multiply that times 4, then you should be billing them at a minimum of $333 an hour. So obviously we'd round that up at a minimum of $350 an hour. Now, if you expect less productivity, that changes the equation, right? So if you expect them to let's do 150,000. Let's say you expect them to only be billing at 1,600 an hour. Now their cost goes up to 93, and now if we do that times 4, we're up to 375 an hour. So the less productive they are, the more you have to charge for their time to make the math work. Now, if you can get more than 4x their hourly rate, then that's even better, because obviously there's other costs to the firm besides for their salary, and they are the only way for you to bring in money. The billers, which are associates and also paralegals, generally those are the two that you're billing out. That's the only way to bring in money to the firm, so it needs to cover all the other costs, which include rent, all your software fees, all your insurance fees. Basically, all the overhead in the firm has to be covered by that work. And the smaller that you are, the more of that overhead it needs to cover, however the smaller the overhead is. But the bigger that you are, the more you can spread that out by the attorney. So back to our hourly pros, the direct correlation to firm costs is the first. The second is that it's easy to determine if the hired billers are paying for themselves. So basically, looking at it from the opposite lens of what I just described, you now can see, in retrospect, if I look at the last 12 months, did this biller bill enough time to pay for themselves? And when I say pay for themselves, I don't mean to meet the cost of their salary. Obviously, they need to be earning a lot more than the cost of their salary in order for this math to work. So you have to figure out what that is, and basically look at your overall firm's profitability or your overall overhead and assign it to your different billers, and work the math backwards. However, when you're billing hourly, it's easy to correlate back to what their productivity was and figure out whether they are carrying their own weight or whether you need to hire somebody else in their place. Those are the pros of hourly billing. The cons of hourly billing is quite the list, and you'll soon start to see why I don't like hourly billing. First of all, you lose clients, and there are 2 different ways that you lose clients in the sales process. One way that you lose a client is they go to somebody else. So if your hourly billing is higher than another firm's hourly billing, then you're going to lose clients simply because they found somebody cheaper. So that's one problem, and that's not necessarily an issue by itself. In other words, you're entitled to charge more than another firm. You just have to do a better job in the sales process of communicating why you're worth more than they are. But there's another way that you lose clients in the sales process. And this I got directly from a Clio survey that they did. And in Clio's survey, they basically said that the hidden number that is not obvious when these surveys are done is determining how many people chose not to pursue the avenue of legal action based on the fact that they had an open-ended price tag of a certain amount per hour with absolutely no way of knowing what it was going to cost them. And that is very large. There's a lot of people who are choosing not to hire any firm, not just yours, because of this open-ended potential of hourly billing that they have no idea what it's going to cost. Yes, they have a retainer that you ask for up front, which gives them some sort of dollar amount in their mind, but you can replenish that retainer 1,000 times, and then they have to pay 1,000 times that initial amount, right? So that has absolutely nothing to do with their final cost. Consumers are smart, and they know that they're basically signing up for an open-ended potential bill that they might not be able to keep up with. So the first con is that it makes it harder to get clients, and it closes you off. You got into the practice of law for a reason. You got into the practice of law most likely because you believed in the justice system, you believed in helping people, you believed in certain things. You're here on a certain mission. So why would you want to have a practice that closes people off and locks them out from the judicial system? So that's the first con. The next one is that when you put a dollar amount on your time or on your associate's time, you're communicating a value to the client. And when you're doing that, you're basically telling the client that the entire value of the transaction that we have is the time that you're taking up of my attorney or of my paralegal. That's the value you're receiving. And that value, in contrast to what they're really getting, is always going to be very low. And that takes away from their understanding of where you are in the client-attorney relationship, because your value is not in the dollars, not in the hours that you're spending with them. Your value is in the end result that you're creating for them. So whether it's getting them through a divorce, or whether it's protecting their assets in an estate, or whether it's getting them a large payout in a personal injury claim, or whether it's protecting a business from legal action, or stopping a business from getting a large fine, or having to owe a lot of money to a past employee. The list goes on depending on your practice area, obviously, but the bottom line is that whatever you're doing for your client has a far greater value on the outcome of what you're creating for them or what you're hoping to create for them than on the time that you spend doing the action of being a lawyer for them. So by communicating your value as an hourly rate, you're actually demoralizing the worth of the firm in the eyes of the client, which on the face of it, there's really nothing wrong with that. But in the long term, when issues arise and questions come up of why is it costing so much, or I don't want to pay the bill because you didn't do a good job in XYZ, those things happen because all they're looking at is you're only worth this amount per hour, and if you didn't earn this hour, then I shouldn't pay you. Whereas they should be looking at the overall picture of what is the value that you are creating for them. The next con is that it creates an unnecessary firm and client friction. And what I mean by this is that there's a certain contention and a certain confrontational aspect of the relationship when it comes to collecting money or requesting a retainer replenishment. Now, very few people are able to just go about it as business as usual, which is why a lot of solos and small firms struggle with their accounts receivables and collections, and why they write down a lot of bills. So when you go to bill your clients, you probably look at the bill and you say, oh my gosh, we spent 3 hours doing this. I can't charge them for 3 hours for this. Let me knock it down to 2. How many of you do that? That is done in so many firms. Practically every lawyer I've run into, their firm is doing that. And what's happening is that automatically you're creating a situation where even if your attorneys have been working their butts off, they're still not being valued at what they're worth because you're billing hourly and you feel like you need to save face with the client when they get the bill. What's wrong with putting the 3 hours on there, even if you feel it could have been done in 2? That's what it took. Send them the 3 hours because you're afraid that they're going to come back and they're going to say, why in the world did this take 3 hours? You're afraid that they might go and show it to another attorney, and the another attorney is going to say, what? They spent 3 hours on this? Should have been 2. And it's going to look like you're padding hours. All these different fears rise up in the back of your mind before you even send the bill. Now you send the bill. Now the client gets the bill. If they weren't expecting it to be that much, then they're going to flip out. And they're going to call you and say, oh my goodness, why is this so high? And they're going to question whether they should continue with you. Every time they get an invoice, potentially they can question, well, should I continue? This is way too much, more than I was expecting to pay. Now, it's not in every situation. Some situations they knew it was going to cost them $100,000 and they're only halfway there. But at some point when it exceeds $100,000, they might get to that point. So depending on the case, the size of the case, the threshold might be different. But it always creates this situation where they're looking at the bill and they question it. Then it creates a situation where they pay it late, or they pay it slowly, or they're slow to replenish their retainer, or they don't pay it at all. Which brings us to the next con, which is it causes accounts receivable problems. And you need to monitor retainer balances, which a lot of firms are really poor at doing, which means that they get into a bigger AR issue. I'm going to ask you, how many of your invoices that you've billed are more than 45 days past due? How many of your clients you're actively serving have a retainer balance of 0? How good are you with requesting retainer replenishments, and how good are your clients at paying those retainer replenishments? So many firms get into this situation where the retainer was set up to protect you, but then you do a poor job of getting it replenished. Your attorneys you don't have a system to tell an attorney to stop work on a client's account because they haven't replenished their retainer and they're out of funds. And then work is done that's unable to be collected because you didn't have a retainer for it. Now, in no other business or almost no other business does the retainer exist. The reason that attorneys have retainers is because clients end up going and ghosting you on a bill. They end up not paying their bill. Why do they end up not paying their bill? Because they're not happy with the outcome, or they're not happy with something that you did, or they're just bad clients. But in no other industry is that required, because unfortunately, in the legal industry, you can't control the outcome sometimes, and therefore it's possible that they're going to have a negative outcome, and that's why you want to make sure they paid you. So why would you set yourself up to get screwed? Why would you set yourself up to have a problem where you can't collect your bills? Yet many of you are doing that. Many of you don't have systems in place to replenish your retainers, and you end up asking for trouble. You end up getting into the situation. So this whole hourly billing thing, coupled with retainers, is a horrible way to do business. And it's a horrible way to be in a relationship with your clients. Your clients should love working with you, yet they're afraid to pick up the phone because it's going to cost them money. Your client, they should be telling you every step of the way any new information that arises, yet they're going to hold back and not give it to you because they're afraid of sending you an email because it's going to cost them money. That is the way that we set up the system with hourly billing. That is the type of relationship we set up with our clients with hourly billing. Another issue with retainers is that you have to go through all this effort to collect money from the client that you may never even need to bill. There's always effort involved in collecting money. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes you send them a bill and they pay it and that's it. And sometimes they don't pay it and you have to chase them, and you tell your attorneys to hold back. And what happens if you end up only needing 3 more hours of work and the retainer is enough to cover 100? Now you issue them a check at the end to close out the account. All that effort that was spent to collect that retainer was completely unnecessary because it didn't cost that much to do. Now, many of you, for that particular one, many of you have set up a system where you review your retainer replenishment requests and if a matter is close to closing, you don't actually do the retainer replenishment request. That goes both ways. I don't agree with that practice, because with that practice, you basically have shot yourself in the foot for any work that you're doing at the end in case they don't pay it. That's a poor practice. Now, what you could do is a partial retainer replenishment request and ask for less. But then if you end up going over that, you're going to look like a fool when you need to ask for more again, potentially. So again, fraught with danger, all kinds of landmines that you need to walk around just because you bill by the hour and you have a retainer. Another con is that hourly billing increases your potential for malpractice suits. When a client is continually paying you and hoping that you're going to win the case for them, and then you don't, they're going to nitpick every single little thing that you did to try to find a reason to get their money back. Or if you're trying to sue them for accounts receivables, then they might turn around and hit you with a countersuit of malpractice. So this is all building up on itself, where the hourly billing now has created issues in collections, which now creates issues for you from an insurance standpoint, where you might have a hard time getting insurance for malpractice because of all these countersuits. So the ball keeps rolling, and it keeps getting worse and worse. And then finally, the last con is a biller who is poor at documenting their time costs the firm money, even if they are productive. So if you have an associate who is a rock star, they are really good. They knock it out of the park. They're winning cases for you. Clients are happy to work with them. They are a keeper, but they just do a poor job of documenting their time. And you know that they're spending time on client matters, and it's just not making it there onto the timesheet. Well, guess what? They're a rock star attorney, but if they don't document their time properly, you're not able to bill it, you're losing money. The firm is losing money even though they're doing a great job. And that is the last of the cons on my list for hourly billing. I'm sure that there are more. I'm sure that I haven't listed them all here, but I feel so strongly about getting rid of hourly billing that I titled this episode The Death of Hourly Billing, because I think that every firm needs to consider moving away from hourly billing. Now, as I explain the alternative and why it's so good, I'm going to ask you to keep in mind that there are some areas where I agree that this kind of billing is not going to make sense, and we'll touch upon those at the end of the episode. But let me introduce you to something that we call flat fee billing, is what the industry calls it. And I actually come from the accounting world, where in the accounting world, they even introduced something past flat fee billing called value-based pricing. And I will touch on that in a different episode. We're not going to talk about that here. For now, I want to keep it simple and talk to you about flat fee billing. Flat fee billing basically is where you tell a client that you're going to give them a set deliverable, and for that set deliverable, it's going to cost X amount of money. And there's no hourly fee. There's no retainer. They agree to pay that fee, and you have to deliver on what you promised. That is flat fee billing in a nutshell. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples of flat fee billing. Let's say you are in criminal law, and somebody calls you and says, hey, I've been arrested. I'm in jail. I need help. Can you help me? So instead of saying, sure, I can come to your arraignment and see if I can, get you to be able to get bail. And that bail hearing, normally you would say that bail hearing is going to cost you, $400 an hour. Well, now you're going to say, to represent you at the bail hearing and get you and do our best to get you out of jail for now is going to cost you $1,000. And that's flat fee. That's what it's going to cost. Are you interested? Yes or no? Let me take your credit card. Another example, you're an estate planning attorney. This is a practice area that has already for a large part of it, adopted flat fee billing. You want a will, it's going to be $1,000. And rather than how long it's going to take me to prepare that will for you. Let's see, should we go through another example? No, we'll skip it. There are a ton of examples. Every single industry has it, okay? Basically, the pros of flat fee billing are as follows. First, the client knows exactly what the cost is up front. So it's easier to close the sale. It's easier to close the sale because people don't like risk. People are risk averse. And somebody would much rather spend $10,000 one time than have an open-ended bill at $500 an hour and hope that it's going to come in at less than $20 an hour, at less than 20 hours. So people like certainty, and when there is certainty with the price, it is far easier to close the sale. Most of the time, we'll talk about the con where this may be a barrier to the sale. So first, it's going to help you close the sale. It's going to also allow somebody who would have otherwise chosen not to use a lawyer and not to go through the justice system for their needs to now say, this is something that I can afford or scrape together, and therefore I am going to go ahead and hire myself an attorney and retain you because of that flat fee. So that is pro number one. Pro number two, you collect the fee at the beginning. You eliminate a ton of headache and overhead in the firm. Why? You don't need to put the money in trust. You've already earned it. They paid you for a set of services. You just need to deliver it. You're not billing by the hour. You don't need to refund any portion of it at the end of being retained. They paid you a flat fee to have it done. There's no hourly billing. You haven't told them how many hours it's going to be. The number of hours spent is irrelevant. There's nothing to refund. So you can have something where it normally would take you 50 hours to do, and you do it in 20. Well, guess what? You get to pocket the difference. You don't need to leave those funds tied up in any way. You also don't need to, if that's the only reason you have a trust account, which in many states is the wrong use of a trust account anyway, you don't need to do triple balance accounting for your trust account because you don't need one. You don't need to do all kinds of reporting overhead that's required. And this is an area where a lot of attorneys are afraid of getting disbarred by mishandling their trust account. If you don't need a trust account at all, well, doesn't that make life easy for you, right? Another pro is that work can be assigned to someone who typically would not be billable. And that would create internal efficiencies in your organization. Let me give you an example. Let's say that the first step of drafting you've completely templated for a certain type of case. And all you need to do is take that template and fill in the client's information, which has already been gathered and collected and exists somewhere else. It just needs to be transposed into your templated draft document. Well, historically, you probably had a paralegal do it because the paralegal is billable. And the receptionist sat there answering phones. Well, now you can have the receptionist do that work. And because you're not billing by the hour, it doesn't matter who did it. And you're using a resource that's probably sitting there not doing anything anyway. And you're now using them, freeing up more time for your paralegal or your associate and allowing your firm to operate more efficiently. Another pro, internal processes can be created to further reduce the cost of labor involved in delivering the service to the client, which further improves your profitability. Go back to the example I just gave. I was talking about drafting, and I mentioned the word template. Right now, you're motivated with hourly billing to not create templates and not be efficient because you can increase how much you bill your client by drafting from scratch each time. Well, what if you now could create a process around this flat fee service that you provide where it used to take 20 hours to complete, but now with your new process, you can knock it out in 5 hours. Well, if your flat fee is based on your assumption of 20 hours of work, you're now making a lot of profit on clients that you used to make a little bit of profit on. That makes your firm much more efficient. On top of the actual profitability of one case, it now gives you more bandwidth with the same staff to handle more cases, which means that you can increase your revenue without increasing your expenses, which is huge, huge. Okay, another pro, no collection issues. If you're doing flat fee billing, collect the fee up front, or have a system where the fee is collected up front and at some point in the middle where you don't continue without the second piece. You're never doing work without it being paid for, and your clients are happy because they're not getting bills that they didn't expect, and you get paid up front. This is how I work with my clients. I get paid up front. If we don't get paid up front, we don't do the work. There is no accounts receivable in my company. It just doesn't exist. We charge you a flat fee, and if you're on a monthly, then you pay monthly. It gets drafted from your account, and if it bounces, we stop work. So that's a huge one. No collections. You can free up staff who are trying to collect money for the firm. And finally, the last pro I have on the list is that it reduces potential for malpractice claims. And this goes, like I explained earlier, why malpractice claims would be higher with hourly billing. It doesn't mean that if you screwed up, you're not going to get sued. But what it does mean is that unless the client is really, really upset about the outcome, it's highly unlikely that a malpractice claim is going to happen. A lot of times the malpractice claim gets triggered because of accounts receivables, because you're trying to run after them for money. With flat fee, you collected it up front. You got rid of that malpractice claim risk. Now, there is one con to flat fee billing, and this is a questionable one. So I've only come up with one. And that con is that it may be a barrier to the sale. Now, the only time that flat fee billing could be a barrier to the sale is if the ticket price is too high. So let's say that you're in family law, and a divorce case from beginning to end can run anywhere from 10 to 100,000 because there's a lot of variables. And we'll talk about variables in next week's episode because it's really important to cover in how you structure flat fee billing. But if you were to, say, make an assumption based on statistics of your past caseloads, and you say, okay, my average client is going to pay $30,000, right? The one who would have paid $10,000, if you now quote them $30,000 for flat fee, they're likely not going to want to go with you because they don't see the value. They're not going to have enough value for the flat fee that you're charging. Because if they're in the 10,000 boat, then they have a simple divorce, then they might not have the benefit that 30,000 is going to provide. The larger the flat fee item, the more of a risk that it's going to become a barrier to the sale. And larger, I mean in respect to the industry that it's in. So, for example, if your firm is serving publicly traded companies, and you're typically billing one single client $1 million a year, then if you have a flat fee item for $100,000, that might be a cheap, easy thing for them to say yes to. So obviously, it's in contrast to the market that it's in and the types of clients you're serving. But the larger it gets, the more it could be a barrier to the sale. And we have to be really careful as we structure your flat fee billing to keep that in mind and make sure that we structure it in a way that we're not creating a problem for us to close the sale. Now, I told you I'll come back to this. There are some areas where flat fee just won't make sense. And one of them is contingency cases. In contingency cases, you're not collecting anything in the first place. Or you have a split fee arrangement. And if you do, then flat fee would make sense for the upfront fee that you're charging potentially. But usually contingency cases are cases that are litigated. And the next item on my list is litigation. Because in litigation, there's no way to predict the number of hours that will be required on the case. And it is by nature a time thing, and by nature it is how much of my time is required it is a very, very difficult thing to do flat fee for. And I'm hoping to have an opportunity to work with some law firms that are in these types of arenas to see if we can come up with a flat fee model that would work. But for right now, I would say that my gut reaction is leave those as hourly for contingency and litigation. Now, one other one that I have on the list is court appearances. And I saved this for last because, yes, court appearances, you can't predict how many court appearances you're going to have in a particular case. Some of them can be solved with 1 or 2 appearances, and some of them you're being dragged back into court, once every 2 weeks for months on end. And I saw this firsthand with a friend of mine who was going through a divorce, and it was just one thing after another with his ex that was just ridiculous, and it just kept delaying the process where, even the judge had enough, and just wanted to close it out. So that can happen. And if you do flat fee, then you're stuck in that situation. So your first reaction is going to be like, okay, for court appearances, there's no way I could do flat fee. I have to charge hourly. But I'm going to make the same arguments I made before about hourly billing. I can tell you firsthand, when I went to a court appearance and my attorney sat there and I was paying my attorney, whatever, I don't even remember how much I was paying per hour. Let's say it was $400 an hour. I was paying my attorney $400 an hour to sit there in the waiting room with me while we were waiting for court. Do you know how much that hurt me as a client? Now, I understand that's the system, and we should understand the value of your time, that you're sitting there, and you're sitting there wasting your time, right? But first of all, you could be productive sitting there in the waiting area. That's another discussion for another time. But the other thing is that with court appearances, you could just do a flat fee, and you could just say, okay, let's assume that a court appearance is going to be me for a day. What is that worth? And instead of making it an hourly thing where the client is looking at their watch and wondering when they're going to get called, you can just assume that there's a certain block of time that's going to be required to drive to court, to sit there and wait. And sometimes you're going to be right, sometimes you're going to be wrong as far as how many hours you were waiting. And you make a flat fee for it. And you basically just tell the client that every time that we have a court appearance, it's going to be X amount of dollars. So let's say it's $1,000. So you tell the client, every time we have a court appearance, it's going to be $1,000. You don't have to worry about how long it takes. The entire appearance is a flat fee. It's $1,000. Now, every time they get a court date, they immediately get an invoice. Prepay the $1,000, then I will come to court with you. And this way, you can then do court appearances as flat fees as well. You just have to keep selling the same thing over and over again. And you can put that into your contract so that they know what it is and there's no surprises. And then you just keep invoicing them for that flat fee for the court appearances, but everything else is being done under the umbrella flat fee arrangement. So there you have it. Hourly billing versus flat fee. I think that I made a pretty strong case for flat fee. And now I'm assuming you're sold on getting flat fee implemented in your firm. And I'm sure that you now have a question. That question is, how do I structure it? How do I figure out what that fee should be? How do I implement this in my firm? Well, stay tuned for next week's episode. And next week, I'm going to dive into how to structure your services as flat fee prices. So hope you plug me into your ears next week. And please do me a favor, go give a rating and review to the show in iTunes or whatever your podcast player is, because that helps people look at the show and say, hey, this is something I want to listen to. And then we can have more people who are able to move their firms forward because of the information we're sharing here. So thank you so much for spending your time with me here today, and I will catch you next week. This week's episode of the Profit with Law podcast has ended, but your growth journey doesn't have to stop here. Head over to profitwithlaw.com/grow, where you can download the Firm Differentiator 10X System Toolkit entirely free. In this toolkit, I share the details of my system being used to grow firms to extreme profitability. That's profitwithlaw.com/grow. Until the next time, remember, A law practice is not for practice, it's for profit.